Dear students, good morning. This is the class for May the 18th, 2020 for Asia e Africa 1. Today I want to show you what the first part of your exam is going to look like. Remember that you have to book your exam in advance, and then I will send you a message via S3 with the code for the exam for the classroom. I'm also going to post the code on my pagina personale docente and my Moodle. Make sure that you have an UNI or email address. Do that through the secretary offices, and to read and check your messages and check your emails. This is what it's going to. The first part of the exam is going to look like. Well, this one is definitely prettier than the one that I would prepare. It was prepared by Professor Balirano, and the level is definitely a little higher than the one that you are going to do, because this is for other years. But anyway, this is the structure. You're going to see that there are 3 sets of exercises, 3 different types of exercises. You could be asked to do sentence transformations. We'll see what that means in a while. Fill in the gaps, or vocabulary, meaning word formation or sentence completion, depending on what you've been studying with the mother tongue teachers. I highly recommend going to that link, that Moodle link that I gave you for all your mother tongue teachers. Look at what Professor Haslam has been doing, units 1 through 5. Plus, I would recommend looking at what Professor Russo is posting. Okay, so do a little bit of both of them. An example of sentence transformation. What does this mean? You have to write a sentence that has more or less the same meaning of the first one that I gave you. And you should not change, you must not actually change the word that I give you in capital letters. Usually, you have to use no more than 5 new words to complete the sentence. It's usually from 2 to 5 words. It depends on the instructions that will be given to you. For instance, I'll take you to the station if you are ready now, my sister said. My sister said she'd take me to the station as long as I was ready. Okay? Or I could give you some fill in the gaps exercise where you have to complete the gap with 1 word. A few years ago, my partner and I had an unpleasant culinary experience. We reserved the table at a restaurant for New Year's Eve. In this case, it's asking you to fill in the gap with a past perfect, and so we had reserved the table at a restaurant. Or you might be asked to fill in the blanks using a word that you've learned from the vocabulary sections that you are preparing with your mother tongue teacher. So a blank is someone who uses violence to steal from you in the street. In this case, the answer was thief. That's what it looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do all these exercises in 5 minutes. Of course not. These are just samples of what these 3 sets of exercises would look like. Plus, if you try the exam in June, I hope you all pass it, but if you try it in June and you don't like the mark or you don't pass, you cannot try it in July. You have to wait until September. If you try it only in July, then you can try it again in September. Let's go to what we were doing last week. We were talking about how varieties of English do not change only depending on the culture that is involved in it, but also through the medium that is used. And we were talking about spoken and written forms of English and how these are influenced by new technologies. We analyzed the cases of emails and how these have evolved in just a couple of decades. How they evolved and how they depend on the gender and the age of who is writing. And plus, we talked about text messages and about abbreviations. It was pretty interesting to see how, for your generation, some abbreviations are considered childish, whereas for my generation in the 30s, they're not considered childish. It's just that you have to keep the two levels separate. You have to know when to use which. And then we watched that video with Professor David Crystal, who was analyzing text messaging among children, among teenagers and children. Today, instead, we're going to talk about Twitter. You know that at the beginning, Twitter was limited to 140 characters. I don't remember the exact number of characters you can use now, but it's definitely longer than that. This does not include the 20 characters that could be used for the Twitter's name. And again, speaking of David Crystal, he also conducted some studies on Twitter. He looked for the word, he searched for the word language in the Twitter search application, and he collected a corpus, a series of a group of 200 tweets from different people, and he wanted to analyze them. He looked at some shortening techniques, and he noticed that, well, those 140 characters were quite limiting, would limit the way in which people type their messages. And there were lots of fragments instead of sentences, like "you can, but you won't get a job." Instead, talk about work-life balance, same issue, business bullshit language. So not sentences. Or just interjections like "yeah," "wow," and "hey" were used quite often. However, he could also notice that there were complete sentences, like "I can't help but be amazed by how my classmate can communicate with sign language. It is truly remarkable." And complex sentences were built using cohesive markers and conjunctions, like "and," "but," "because," "well," "as well," "also," and lots of "I meant" used for clarification. So it's not just fragments. There is some more complex syntax going on there. So by analyzing the length of sentences, it could be said that actually Twitter is more complex than one would think. For instance, he did the same thing, looking for the word global Englishes. And this is what it came out. "English is a de facto global language, can't argue with that, but that makes native speakers' Englishes relative." Or, "Today I covered phonetics and global Englishes," with a smiley. Or something more jargon or discourse community related. "If you're a RetComp scholar, it's worth joining Wexmook for the Global Englishes Discuss forum alone. So popular." Yeah? You can see what's going on in that sentence. There's lots of vocabulary that maybe if somebody is not into what they're saying, it might not be understood. Or comments on courses like, "I like the course already. Concept of global Englishes is quite interesting." Okay, and it goes on and on with different cases about global Englishes, also including the author of the book here, with a launch day for Center for Global Englishes. Jenkins promises controversy in her inaugural lecture at 6 p.m. And you can see some abbreviation there. For further details into how technology is changing English, I invite you to watch this video, David Crystal, and it's about 10 minutes long. So please pause the video here and we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, so David Crystal is pretty interesting to listen to. Different topic now. C4. We're going back to varieties of English. Actually, not varieties of English, but sub-varieties of English. We're going to look at some forms of English that are not actually recognized as varieties of English. And we'll see what I mean with that in a second. There is a sub-variety of English that is known as Singlish, also known as Colloquial Singapore English, CSE, that is different from the standard variety of English that is spoken in Singapore, that is named Standard Singapore English. You can see that Singlish has a status of its own if you look at what Gupta says. She says that, well, look at the word Spanglish or Hindlish. They come from Spanish and English, or Hindi and Hindlish. What happens with the word Singapore? The prefix sing, or the first part of the word sing, is not a language. It's a city. It's an area. So we're not talking about a language, but geographical features. So Singapore can be classified as a colloquial English. That is the one form of English native language that is used by those who learn English at home. We've already covered lots of the features of Singapore English during the first part of the course. But to review them, I would recommend pausing the video here and watching this 4-minute video that summarizes some of the features for you. So some of the main features that this scholar was talking about is the fact that past tense is not marked. So you're going to hear something like she eat here yesterday, okay, not she ate, or that copulas are usually dropped, okay, auxiliary verbs like this coffee house very cheap instead of is very cheap. For the young ones, all right, also la. And something that is very typical of Singapore English is that the word already indicates aspect. So instead of using present perfect or past perfect, they would say, my baby speak already. Or the rest of them already completed their studying. Okay, so that indicates if something is finished or not. Just like with other varieties of English, the non-countable nouns are usually said as countable. So I bought a lot of furnitures from IKEA, or I'm reading some fictions. The opposite case is that indefinite articles are usually dropped. Yeah, sat on elephant's back. Among the features of sentence structure that you've heard of during the course, during the video, there's the use of pragmatic particles like la, that is used to create solidarity. Like shopping-wise, nothing but much to buy there, la. Or a indicated that there is something more to fall in what somebody's saying. Which subject a? I guess I have no preference now. As for pronunciation, there are the usual characteristics of different varieties of English from this area, and so no use of the sounds th and the, or the final position where th is usually replaced with an f. So with is pronounced as with, or birth as birth. But these are all things that I already said previously, so we can go ahead. Just one thing about borrowings. In the state of Singapore and in the cities of this area, there are 3 other languages that are spoken. Okay, Malay, Hokkien, and another language that I don't remember. So there are lots of borrowings that come from these languages. What we're interested in this part of the course is what is behind the politics of Singlish. In the year 2000, there was a new movement called Speak Good English Movement, SGEM. According to those who advocated this type of movement, Singlish should not be considered English. It is English corrupted by Singaporeans, because it's a broken, ungrammatical English sprinkled with words and phrases from local dialects and Malay, which English speakers outside Singapore have difficulties in understanding. Okay, this goes back to what we were saying about the necessity of these populations to maintain international intelligibility in English. Can't say that. What does this mean? Yes, they want to affirm their national identity, but this type of English is not understood around the world, or at least it's difficult to understand it. So, with this movement, with the Speak Good English movement, Singapore keeps importing teachers from the inner circle in order to make sure that there are good role models of British English in their schools. Okay, so they're even more specific. They aim at British English. However, this movement is not accepted by everybody because Singlish is a national identity. It's part of a cultural identity, according to lots of Singaporeans. However, we must say that it's a very strong movement. And according to some scholars, like Rabdi and Duterding, the government might be successful in getting rid of Singlish. And I have a couple of questions for you, and maybe you can answer to some of them in the comment box. Do you think that Singlish is a potential threat to Singapore's economy and the financial stability of its population? Should financial considerations always influence language policy, or do you believe that cultural factors should take precedence? And why do you think Singlish attracts such negative attitudes in the extent that is regarded as broken, ungrammatical, and even corrupt? To understand what we're talking about, I would recommend, well, with Singapore English, this 4-minute video over here is very important, okay? Because you can hear what Singapore English sounds like and give an answer to these questions. As you can see, this video is a little shorter than usual because it includes some links, and I'll copy them over here. So the videos that you should watch for today are this first one about how technology is changing English. And then the second video is this one over here about Singapore English. And now let's look at the part for the song. Give me a second, sorry. For today's song, I really want to thank Roberta, and she suggested I can only write my name. Kids would laugh at my mom's accent and the food that she made. Say that stranger is my brother, 'cause we all look the same. Thought I'd be cool if I could laugh too. Even at my own expense, I'd be just like all of those guys, all American. Spent my life wishing my eyes were shaped a little differently, and always answered back in English when my family spoke to me. Now I'm ashamed I can only write my name. I'm ashamed that I'm the only one to blame, that I can only write my name. I lost it all when I was young, so no one would ask me where I'm from. And now I don't speak the language, wouldn't even know how to say that I'm ashamed. Want to sit down with my grandpa. I know nothing about smile and nod instead of talking. Only way we know how. So forgive me. All the years I was embarrassed. Must have hurt to see I couldn't care less. I rejected my own culture like all Americans. Maybe I've just never had a hero I could look up to. It's hard to see yourself in Superman when he looks nothing like you. Now I'm ashamed I can only write my name. Lost it all when I was young, so no one asked me where I'm from, and now I don't speak the language, wouldn't even know how to say that I'm ashamed. I can only say that I understand, and really I can't stop running from who I am and write my own name. And the link to the song is here. It's point number 3. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow, Tuesday, for our next class. Bye. Take care.